Sure. Here's just the script for your intro and hook. GE 2025 is coming. But have you ever wondered what could actually happen based on the vote count? Did you know that if the opposition wins just over 1/3 of the seats, they can block any constitutional changes, even if the PAP still forms the government? And what if PAP loses its majority or has to form a coalition with an opposition party? What about investor confidence? So, when public holiday? Let's break it all down. Here are 4 possible scenarios that could unfold after GE 2025. Scenario 1. PAP wins the majority. Opposition gets less than 1. This is the most familiar outcome, and it's what Singapore has experienced for over 4 decades. In GE 2020, for example, PAP won 83 out of 93 seats. That's around 89% of parliament. The Workers' Party took 10 seats, just about 10%. That's well below the 1/3 mark. So what does that mean? PAP forms the government as usual. They can pass laws easily, and they also have the power to amend the Constitution if needed, because they hold more than 2/3 of the seats. No parliamentary roadblocks. In other words, business as usual. But here's what people often overlook. Even in this scenario, the opposition still plays a crucial role. They raise tough questions, debate policies, and bring alternative views to the table. Remember the intense debates over the pandemic response or the housing affordability discussions? That came from both sides of the aisle. And honestly, that's healthy for democracy. For many Singaporeans, this outcome feels safe. It brings predictability. Investors remain confident. International businesses see Singapore as stable and reliable. No shocks to the system. But here's the catch. Voter behavior is shifting. Some Singaporeans vote opposition, not because they dislike PAP, but because they want more balance, more accountability. They say, PAP is strong enough already, let's make them work harder. Or even, let's not let the opposition lose their deposit. So while this scenario is the most likely, it still tells us something important. Singaporeans are thinking more critically about their vote. And even small shifts in voter mindset could shape future elections in big ways. Let's move to scenario 2. Where the opposition wins over 1/3 of the seats. Things start to change. Scenario 2, PAP wins majority, but opposition secures over 1/3 of seats. Now this is where things get interesting. Let's say PAP still wins more than half the seats, so they stay in power and form the government. But this time, the opposition wins more than 1/3 of the seats in parliament. That's a game changer. Why? Because with just over 1/3, the opposition gains something powerful, the ability to block any constitutional amendments. Here's a quick explainer. To pass normal laws in Parliament, you just need a simple majority. But to amend the Constitution, you need a 2/3 supermajority. So if the opposition crosses that 1/3 threshold, they can say no to changes in big foundational laws. Think of the Constitution as Singapore's operating system. It defines how Parliament works, the roles of the president, citizens' rights, and more. During the COVID-19 pandemic, for example, the Constitution had to be amended to let Parliament meet virtually during emergencies. No 2/3? That wouldn't have happened. Now imagine this in 2025. PAP wants to tweak a major policy requiring a constitutional amendment, say, something involving electoral boundaries or changes to the role of elected officials, and the opposition has the numbers to block it. Suddenly, Parliament becomes less predictable. Every amendment becomes a negotiation, and Singapore steps into a more pluralistic political era. But what about everyday life? On the ground, it might not feel like a revolution. The MRT still runs, schools are still open, chicken rice still tastes great. But in the long run, the balance of power has subtly shifted. And here's something relatable. More opposition voices equals more scrutiny, more robust debates. Some Singaporeans see this as necessary. They want more transparency, more pushback, more accountability. It's no longer about just who wins, it's about how power is distributed. Even opposition leader Pritam Singh has said his party's goal is to win 1/3 of the seats, not to take over, but to keep the government in check. So if this happens in GE 2025, it might be a turning point in Singapore's political maturity. All right, let's take it one step further. What happens if PAP doesn't win the majority at all? Scenario 3 is next, and it gets real. Scenario 3, PAP loses the majority. Okay, this is the big one. What if, for the first time in Singapore's history, the PAP loses its majority in parliament? Let that sink in. That means they win less than 50% of the seats. In this case, they can't form the government, at least not alone. This would trigger a political shakeup like Singapore has never seen before. So what happens next? Well, the government would likely be formed by the opposition, either a single party, like the Workers' Party if they win big, or a coalition of smaller parties coming together to take the lead. Or, and here's a twist, PAP might even form a coalition with an opposition party just to retain some form of control. Sounds far-fetched? Maybe. But hey, politics is full of surprises. Just look at what's happened in other countries, Italy, Israel, even Malaysia. Coalitions are the new normal in many democracies. But here's where things get a little shaky. Singapore's reputation for stability is a major reason why international investors and multinational companies trust us. They're not here because our weather is great or because the kopi is strong, even though it is. They're here because the system is predictable. So if there's a sudden change, especially one the market isn't prepared for, investor confidence might shake, foreign direct investment could stall, the stock market could react, and the average Singaporean might feel that uncertainty in real terms, jobs, prices, the economy. But don't panic. Even if PAP loses the majority, Singapore's institutions remain strong. We have civil servants, laws, and processes that don't change overnight. Still, here's something to think about. There's no precedent for this. It has never happened before. We don't know how opposition parties will work together if they have to govern. They've spent decades being the check, not the driver. Will they unite? Will they clash? Will Singapore see more openness or more political gridlock? These are real, relatable concerns. And here's the part that hits home. If this happens, Singapore enters a new chapter, one with more unknowns, more risks, but maybe also more possibilities. Whether that's exciting or terrifying, that depends on your vote. Now let's wrap it up with one final scenario. What if PAP wins everything again, like in the old days? Scenario 4 is next. Scenario 4, PAP wins all the seats again. All right, let's take it back, way back. What if in GE 2025, PAP wins every single seat in Parliament? No opposition, zero alternative voices in the House, just like it was before 1981. Now, to be fair, this scenario might sound a little unlikely today, especially with how politically active and vocal the younger generation has become. But technically, it can happen. And if it does, here's what it means. With full control of Parliament, the PAP would have a supermajority, which gives them the power to pass any law they propose, amend the Constitution without resistance, push forward policies without lengthy debate. Efficient? Absolutely. Controversial? Probably. Why? Because while things might run smoothly from the top, checks and balances disappear. And that's where it gets relatable. Imagine this. You're at work and your manager has no team members to challenge or suggest better ideas. They do whatever they think is best, no questions asked. Sometimes it works, but other times it's a recipe for blind spots. That's exactly what having zero opposition MPs could look like in Parliament. There'd be less public debate, fewer alternative ideas, and potentially less transparency. And we've seen how public pressure and opposition voices like the Workers' Party or NCMPs have helped raise real concerns that affect everyday Singaporeans. Without them, who asks the tough questions? Who speaks up on housing, cost of living, healthcare concerns, if not from a different political angle? Now let's be real. Since 1981, there has always been opposition in Parliament, be it the late Chiam Si Tong, Low Thia Kiang, or newer faces like Pritam Singh. Also, these days, every constituency is contested. There are no walkovers like in the past. So yes, this scenario is possible, but unlikely. Still, it's worth thinking about, because a parliament with only one voice, even if it's a capable one, might not represent the diversity of views Singaporeans have today. At the end of the day, your vote determines how many voices will speak for you in Parliament. 4 possible scenarios that could unfold after GE 2025. From a full opposition coalition forming the government, to a PAP supermajority running the show solo, it all depends on your vote. Whether you're voting for change, stability, or just hoping for better hawker prices, remember this: your single vote shapes not just your estate, but the future of the country. So vote wisely, not just emotionally, not just for vibes, but for vision. And hey, if you found this breakdown helpful, hit that like button, subscribe, and maybe share this with a friend who's still undecided. Thanks for spending these few minutes with me, and who knows, after GE 2025, we just might get that public holiday. See you in the next one.